Hi there. Today, I would like to talk about some of the principles of the Orton-Gillingham approach. As you know, everyone trained in the Orton-Gillingham approach has something in common, and that is we all follow a set of specific principles of the approach. And that is sort of the interwoven thread and commonality between everyone trained in Orton-Gillingham. And as we know, all of these principles are related back to the amazing work of Dr. Samuel Orton and Anna Gillingham and their what we refer to maybe as the Ortonian prescription. To learn more about that, I highly recommend that you dive into season 1 of the Together in Literacy podcast. Casey and I really go into each of the parts of the Ortonian prescription which are related to the Orton-Gillingham principles of the approach. But I want to talk about 2 principles today. And I've had a few questions recently, so I thought, why don't I address it in a video message? And that is, well, what does it mean when people say that Orton-Gillingham is prescriptive and diagnostic? What does that mean? First of all, I will say those are really, really important principles. They're ones that have taken me years really to hone in on my craft through the amazing supervision of my supervisors when I was in Orton-Gillingham training. It really does take time to practice and learn how to be effectively prescriptive and diagnostic. And so people were wondering, well, what does that mean when you say you're prescriptive and diagnostic? What are we talking about here? That is such a great question. So let's talk first about being diagnostic. And being diagnostic, when we're working with students, particularly challenged learners, means looking at all of the pieces of the puzzle too. We may have our assessment data already in place. Perhaps there is an IEP, perhaps there isn't. But what we do have in front of us is a challenged reader. So what we want to do is be constantly monitoring. And when we have our diagnostic hat on, what are we monitoring? We are monitoring a variety of responses from our students. We're looking at their verbal responses and listening, of course, their nonverbal responses. That means what are their reactions when particular directions are given or particular questions are asked? We are looking at their written responses. So that in that way, by being diagnostic, we are constantly checking at many different points in the lesson how a student is either one of 2 things: whether they're showing areas of weakness, and of course, where they're showing areas of progress. And by monitoring and looking at their verbal, nonverbal, and written responses, that is going to inform our instruction so that whatever we see happening, then either within the confines of that one particular lesson plan, you're going to make adjustments as needed in your instruction, or it's going to be critically important for you to make note of those responses so that for future lessons, that is incorporated. And that is where you become prescriptive based on what you saw from a diagnostic perspective. That is where you become prescriptive. And in that way, that is where we are taking into account all of the areas where we saw maybe some challenges, some weaknesses, and where we saw areas of strength and progress. And we are creating lesson plans that are tailored to the individual needs of that particular student. So our lesson plans are where we're going to prove that we're prescriptive because they are going to contain components or elements of that lesson that will specifically address the areas of weakness that we noticed in previous lessons. So anytime where there is phonemic awareness drill, word reading, sentence reading, dictation, any of those pieces where you felt like in the previous lessons there were some areas of weakness, then those will be addressed and further monitored in subsequent lessons. And we want to constantly be monitoring and taking notes so that we can continue in that cycle. Diagnostic, prescriptive. So we're always monitoring in the moment, and we're always looking ahead by being prescriptive and thinking ahead. Okay, in my next lesson, looking at your notes, I will be working on this skill, or we're going to have to review this particular concept a bit further. And the beauty of being both diagnostic and prescriptive is that sometimes when you're in the midst of a lesson and things really are showing that, all right, this is too challenging right now, we can backtrack. We can make adjustments as needed. We can change up the tools that we're using. We can change up the strategies that we're trying with a student that may not work. We who are really highly trained in the approach know that we can make those decisions within that lesson plan as needed without feeling like we're locked into strictly following a rigid manual. So because we're able to cater to the individual needs of these students based on our monitoring, based on our prescriptive lesson plans, then we really have the beauty of seeing some wonderful progress being made. And in Orton-Gillingham, we are working towards mastery in many regards. And we don't really move forward until we see certain levels of mastery. I have a whole blog post about mastery on theliteracynest.com if you're wondering about that topic. And so I hope that by looking at the individual needs of learners, by thinking about the materials that you're using, thinking about the pacing that you have, because for some kids, you're going to find, especially our challenged learners, the pacing is going to be too quick. So by looking at that, looking at the way you introduce concepts, the way you review them, the way you assess them at multiple points in the lesson, that is all going to help you to be a more diagnostic and prescriptive Orton-Gillingham educator. So I hope that that has helped to answer your question about those two very important principles of the Orton-Gillingham approach. Thank you so much for watching this video message, and you can check out either the video vault on theliteracynest.com, or you can see me on my YouTube channel at The Literacy Nest. Thank you so much and have a great day.